Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Very wide-ranging speech you gave last night at State of the City. You covered a number of different topics, but the overall focus really dovetails nicely with what people are talking about here today: crime, schools, jobs, development, blight. These things all focus on the future of Detroit neighborhoods.
Well, that's it. And you know, I have a map in my office that shows the sales prices of every neighborhood from 2014 to 2015. And I track it all the time because if you want an easy way to decide whether people are moving back into the city or moving out of the city, you look at the sales prices. Sales prices only go up when more people want to move in than move out. And it's been just a lot of fun to watch every quarter as it spread. And now the majority of the city, the sales prices were 20% more in 2015. 2014, some places they're 100% more. And so we're making progress, and I'm hoping a year from now, the whole city will show that. But you can see what's happening in neighborhoods from east to west to southwest. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, well, let's start with that idea of prices. Home sales, as you said, the prices are going up. Home sales, I believe, are somewhat rising, but what's not growing as fast as that is the number of mortgages that get written in the city of Detroit. You still have, I think, close to 80% of the sales are cash. That is a problem that gets to one of the other concerns that people have is about who is coming to populate Detroit. If you're a middle-class family, you don't have $100,000 or $120,000 to put down on a house. The people who are doing that are people who are coming in from the outside.
Well, you know, Stephen, when I started, I thought, you know, if I get the lights on, get the ambulances and the police to show up, get these abandoned houses down, home sales will take off. I didn't really understand anything about mortgages. I've since become an expert, and the reality is, as you say, last year there were 3,000 single-family home sales in Detroit, only 500 mortgages. Now you think about that, 85% of the home sales are for cash, and the reason has nothing to do with income or credit score. What's happening is this, you'll have a person who's got a good job, good credit score, agrees to buy a house for $60,000. The appraisers look backwards. In the suburbs, property values are basically at 2007 levels. They've come all the way back. In Detroit, they're still lagging behind. So I agree to buy a house from you at $60,000. The appraiser comes back and says it's worth $50,000. Under the federal regs after the last housing crisis, nobody can make a mortgage. Doesn't matter what my income is, doesn't matter what my credit score is. And I say to the bank, but this house sold for $150,000 in 2007. I'm getting a good deal at $60,000. Bank says, sorry. And so what was happening over and over is that person goes out to Warren or Southfield and Redford, buys a house for $120,000. They can get a mortgage, same credit score, same income, but because the appraisals are higher, everybody who was gaining in prosperity, if they wanted to become a homeowner, had to move out of the city. And so we had to fix it. And it took a while. But we got President Obama involved, getting Treasury. We got the governor involved with the State Housing Authority. Bill Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative took this on as a personal mission, took everybody to Denver last June. And we had bankers, Gary Torgo, the president of Tolmer, and Sandro Dinello, the president of Flagstar, and Steve Steino, the president of Huntington, all got in a room and said, we're going to fix this. And we've done it. Now they have a program where they will give you the first and second mortgage in a product called Detroit Home Mortgage. If you can get a mortgage in the suburbs, you can now get a mortgage in Detroit for the same amount. And so now it'll happen through the banks in a normal way. So I think we've solved the mortgage problem.
Do you worry as you see home prices increasing, which is in many ways a good thing? Obviously that means more tax revenue for the city to provide services. But do you worry that what we're seeing is some people who have been here for long periods of time being squeezed out of their neighborhoods, no longer able to afford to live certain places?
So there's two things. One is if you own your home, of course, you're not being squeezed out. This is good for you. In fact, you probably couldn't get a home repair loan to fix your house because the appraisal on your house was too low. Now, as the home prices go up, you can actually get that. And your wealth is growing, et cetera. So for the homeowners who have been here, this is an excellent thing. If you are a renter, it's a different issue because rent prices are going up, and you may have to move from that neighborhood to another neighborhood. But every day...
Is that fair?
Here's what I'm doing. I've got on our website, buildingdetroit.org, we're auctioning good vacant houses every single day. Many of them bought for as low as $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000. And so what I'm saying to somebody who was paying $600 a month in rent, and now it's gone up to $700 and they can't afford to stay there, you can buy a house from us for $1,000. It's going to take some time to fix it up, but you could own your own house. And so in Detroit, there is lots and lots of good stock that's vacant. There's lots and lots of rental property, and I think it is a very good thing for the city that housing prices are starting to head up to where they were. I think it's good for everybody.
Yeah. You started your speech last night talking, I believe, about crime and the lingering problems we have with crime, some of the things that are getting better. Response times, reported response times are down. You announced that you're going to be able to hire 200 more officers this year, and you talked about the initiative around gas stations, which I want to start with. I think that's a really interesting and different approach, and it's sort of targeted at one of the big problems that drives crime in the city.
So the violence in Detroit, well, we're down in homicides 3 straight years. It's way out of whack with the rest of the country. Our homicide rate is 5 times that of Boston or New York. It is not true that people in every urban city experiences this level of violence. And so the criminals make risk-reward decisions every day. What law enforcement has done in Boston and New York is convince them that you do not settle a beef with a gun, that if you commit a crime with a gun, the entire wrath and focus of the federal government, state government, county government, and city government comes down on you. And people in those cities are choosing to do whatever they're doing without gun violence. We need to change that decision here in Detroit. And I'm working with Barb McQuaid, who's doing such a great job as U.S. Attorney, and Kim Worthy as prosecutor. And so we're saying, how do you change decisions? At gas stations right now, it's a maximum kind of risk-reward decision. You've got a person who's vulnerable, you know they're there pumping gas, you know you can get the car. And so gas stations, parties, stores, drive-thrus are points of maximum vulnerability. We said, let's flip that. And we went to these gas stations and said, I want you to light your station all the way to the perimeter so bright you can read a magazine. I want you to put in high-definition color cameras so we can see every detail of the license plate and the people, and I want you to send them by internet to police headquarters, and we'll monitor them. It's going to cost you about $6,000 a gas station to do it. The first 6 signed up. We've got signs posted very visibly. We've got a green light and signs posted saying this is being monitored at police headquarters. The 8 gas stations have seen tremendous growth in their revenue in the evenings. And so the criminals now, we've had several cases that we've solved, not that were committed on site, but it turned out we could see things off site or people we were looking for. And the criminals are now learning you can't even show up and pump your gas at one of these stations because if we spot you as a known felon, we're sending somebody out to get you. So we've now changed these focuses instead of a zone of danger to a zone of safety. And we've got 34 more in line right now. And before this year's over, we're going to have 100 to 200 gas stations, party stores, drive-through restaurants, Coney's, that are going to be green light partners. So we're trying to change the way we do law enforcement.
Yeah, 200 more officers for the force this year. That would bring the total, I think, to somewhere around 1,700.
Around 2,500.
2,500. Yes, yeah, I was off. Still, that's not anywhere close to the number that we used to have to patrol a city that's as large as Detroit, a city with as much crime as Detroit. The population has gone down, but the crime really hasn't. Do you feel like we need a lot more officers?
No, I don't. 2,500 officers is a good number if they're deployed efficiently. And so this is where I come from. I come from a hospital setting where you figure out how to move patients through with the least wasted time possible. We're now looking, and this is Chief Craig's doing a great job at this. We got officers who were spending 2 or 3 hours when they take somebody to the detention center waiting to drop them off and get back on the road. We've dramatically shortened that. So they drop them off, there's a team there, we get the cops back on the street. We had times where officers, because they didn't have laptops in their cars, had to go back to headquarters to write a report. Now they're writing the reports on their screen. We are actually tearing apart their days, including things like how long does it take them to get gas, which in the city of Detroit, you know, we got people sitting in lines for 30 minutes to pump at a couple of restricted gas pumps. We're now looking at, could we have the officers fill up at our green light gas stations and keep them on the road? And so So if you've got 2,500 officers whose time is being used efficiently as police officers, we're fine. If we got 2,500 officers whose 50% of their time is on downtime, we're not. And the reason you've seen the response time drop dramatically is not that we've had a huge number of officers on the street, it's that their time is being allocated much more efficiently.
Yeah. At the same time, crime, of course, is not just a police problem. It is a social problem driven by a number of different things, lack of opportunity, education. You addressed some of those things during your speech as well. You also, of course, were interrupted a few times last night by some folks who don't think you're doing such a hot job.
Actually, they were protesting the emergency manager at Flint. I told them they were geographically challenged.
They were in the wrong spot. But they were also, I mean, they were also talking about some things here in Detroit, water shutoffs, foreclosures, some of the things that people in the city who continue to struggle, I think, are looking at and thinking, how long will we have to sort of live like this before the changes that are happening for other people get to us? What do you say to those Detroiters who are in those kinds of situations, people who are dealing with whether to pay their water bill or the rent, people who may not be able to pay the taxes on their houses?
So I still do a house party every week where I sit in a neighborhood with a group of people. I talk to them directly every week. I know exactly what's on their minds. On the foreclosure side, of course, this is one of the most remarkable bipartisan solutions we've had. Last year, there were all these stories about 60,000 foreclosures. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And we had about 40,000 occupied properties. We got together with Governor Snyder and the Republican and Democratic leadership in Lansing, and the problem was that the treasurer by law could not put you into a payment plan without charging you 18% interest. Okay, who's going to make that deal? And so we got a law changed to say the treasurer can offer people a 5-year repayment schedule at 6%. We got last year 36,000 households that got a foreclosure notice, got into a payment plan, and got off the foreclosure track last year. Pretty much anybody who wanted to could. Now, as I said last night, 36,000 households, that's the entire city of Southfield. So what we did last year was essentially take the equivalent of the city of Southfield and keep them in their homes. And so what I'm hearing when I'm in these living rooms is, thank you for working out the foreclosure payments. There's 2 people on this block who stayed in their house because of it. And now as property values are coming back, you're feeling better about your situation. And of course, when we keep people in their homes, it stabilizes every other house in that neighborhood. So the conversations I'm having are with people who recognize the progress that we're making.
Right, but of course, underlying those problems, foreclosures, water shutoffs, is the poverty that we have in the city, which, as you point out, is, like crime, a different animal here in the city of Detroit than it is in other places. What, as mayor, what are the things that you can do to sort of reverse that trend?
You know, it's about jobs. I mean, the cure to poverty is jobs. And, you know, we've done things that seem boring to a lot of people, but to people opening companies are dramatic. We have dramatically sped up all of the permitting, the licensing, the review process, made it a whole lot easier. We had people who went out of business because they ran out of cash before the city approved their permits and they couldn't open. But you look at what's happened. Shinola, a company that didn't exist 4 years ago, employs 550 Detroiters making things. And they're finding out we got hard-working, right? Isn't that great? Hard-working Detroiters. Sakti, a company from India that makes parts for GM car on the site of the old Southwestern High School, an abandoned school site, 650 people working, including a number of ex-felons who were hiring from the prisons, and they're finding the returning citizens to be some of the most dedicated workers because you got folks who know if I lose this job, I might not have another one. We have been landing company after company. We've been doing things on Motor City Match to encourage entrepreneurs who do a lot of hiring as well. And so I look at this and I say, 8,000 more Detroiters are working today than 2 years ago. I need another 50,000 jobs. Can we get 5,000 more jobs a year for the next 8 years? I mean, this is not something you snap your fingers or I care enough, all of a sudden poverty goes away. You have to have a strategy that says, here's my source of income, and then we got to align the workforce training with Dave Meter from DTE and Cindy Paskey from Strategic Staffing are heading a group of every major employer in this town who are saying, here are actually the jobs I'm hiring for. Let's align the training for these jobs, and let's track Detroiters into them. So we're making progress, but it's a week at a time, a month at a time.
Talk about how density in neighborhoods sort of fuels that economic activity. And I think of when I was a kid here in the 70s and 80s, the kind of density in neighborhoods like Russell Woods, which working class, middle class neighborhood, Dexter Davison area. Dexter was the sort of economic spine of that neighborhood. You would drive up and down there now. All of that is gone because the people are gone. Can you create the jobs that Detroiters need with the wages that will help them escape poverty if you don't have that kind of density back in those neighborhoods?
So in 2014, the average house in Russell Woods sold for $11,000. Last year, the average house in Russell Woods sold for $30,000. We tripled the value in that neighborhood. And so now we have brought in Maurice Cox as our planning director, world-class planning director we brought in from New Orleans. And Stephen, he's talking about exactly what you're saying. How is Detroit distinguished from the suburbs? Of course, in downtown and midtown, we've got the density and the walkability. And we're talking about density building. It's all we talk about. Can you take the neighborhoods we're filling in? Let's also take the vacant apartment buildings, fill them in. And now when you've got rooftops and you've got bodies, it's a whole lot easier to get retailers to want to be there. They want to be where they've got customers. And so we're defining zones to be targeted for lending, for economic development activities and housing to create exactly that, because what will differentiate us from the suburbs is you don't get in the car and you drive 1.5 miles to the strip mall, but that actually you've got a community that nearby you can walk to your park, you can walk to your laundromat, to the local drugstore and the like, and it's what you remember. It's what makes cities special. We're not going to be able to do it across the whole city at once, but we are creating density building zones, and every single investor comes in, whether they want single-family houses, whether they want to do apartments, whether they want to do retailers. We say, these are our density building zones, and this is where we want you to concentrate. And we're going to find out in the next few years if that strategy works.
Yeah. You also talked last night about a new potential challenge that we face with the pension funding here in Detroit. One of the things that helped drive us into bankruptcy in the first place was supposed to be taken care of in the grand bargain and the bankruptcy settlement. You say that the books now suggest we will be $490 million short by 2024 if we don't do something. You also made some accusations about that last night.
Yeah, I don't say that. The actuaries for the pension funds say that. And John Hill, our chief financial officer, who's been reviewing it, says it appears the actuaries for the pension funds are correct. And it's extremely disturbing. But we came out of bankruptcy with a plan of adjustment. Of course, an emergency manager came in, excluded the local officials from the finances, put a plan through that was approved by the bankruptcy judge that showed that the pensions would be fully funded. We had a grand bargain. We had retirees take cuts. We had foundations kick in funds. We had the state kick in funds. And we were told it was fully funded. To have a matter of just months later, an outstanding actuarial firm like Gabriel Roeder working for the pension funds come in and say, you're off $490 million in your assumptions. And to have John Hill, our CFO, say, I think they're right. It looks like the bankruptcy consultants used a set of life expectancy tables that were significantly out of date and assumed people weren't living as long. That's very, very troubling. And so we have two questions. One is what we do about the fact that it happened. But at the end of the day, the real question is, we have to deal with this. And so in past times, the mayor would have kind of swept it under the rug, or maybe I say it's not that big a deal. I was honest with people. It's not a crisis. It's not hitting this year. It's hitting by 2024. And if we act responsibly and plan for it, we can manage it by 2024, and that's what we're going to do. But everybody needs to understand, as we sit down and make different spending decisions, that keeping the promise of the retirees of funding the pension fund is going to be a priority in the spending in city government, and I wanted people to understand why that was going to be.
Okay, you also talked about schools last night. We have pending legislation in Lansing that would radically reshape public education in Detroit yet again. You also said something that really caught my attention. You talked about the debt that has mounted while the state has had control of the schools and the need for the state to take responsibility for that and pay it off. But then you immediately said, and you don't pay that off by taking that money from other school districts. I think the quote was, you don't find money for kids by taking money from other kids or something like that, which gets to a much bigger question here in the state of Michigan, which is how we fund education generally and whether anybody has enough money to provide the education that kids need.
And here's an issue I have with the way state government has gone. I'm a metrics-driven guy. The governor's a metrics-driven guy. You can go on his website. He's got his dashboards. We've got dashboards on climate for economic development and our tax levels and the like, which we measure. And that's appropriate. You know what we don't ever measure in here? We aren't benchmarking the math and reading scores of our students. We haven't been benchmarking those against other states because they're going like this on a yearly basis. And so if our economic climate is improving, but it comes at the expense of the children's learning, isn't that a problem? And my point is the state of Michigan ought to be benchmarking our students' achievement along with everything else, because when you look at that, you'll say, I would make different decisions. And so the idea, as was first proposed, that you cut $50 a kid from the other school districts in the state to pay off the debt the emergency manager right up in Detroit, wasn't fair to the children in the other districts. I think they're now moving on to sources like tobacco funds or other ideas, but I think it is critical if we're going to ask parents in districts around this state to be behind us, and I do think parents in every district have a responsibility for our children. We can't be saying to them, take money from your own kids. And that's the case I'm making. I will be testifying before the House Appropriations Committee at 3 o'clock today on this very subject, and I'm going to continue to push for that. And again, I think most legislators agree with that. They don't think you should steal from one group of kids to pay for these kids. Yeah.
Let me also ask you about the return of Democratic control to Detroit schools. It's been a long time that the state has had the ultimate authority in terms of what happens here. You said something again last night that caught my attention, that you'd like to have school board elections by August of this year to bring the school board back. As someone who covered education in the city 20 years ago, long before state intervention, covered the school board, saw how difficult it was to have quality candidates who get elected. The trouble we got in the first place with schools was under an elected board. What is it about today and now that you think will go differently in that regard?
Look, we've had good and bad presidents. We've had good and bad governors. We got good and bad county executives. That's democracy. And so look at what happened. The state of Michigan in 2009, and this was under Governor Granholm. This wasn't Rick Snyder. The state of Michigan in 2009 took over the Detroit Public Schools because they said local school board can't manage. We are now on the 7-year anniversary of the state running the schools. 7 straight years of deficit. Half of the children have left the public schools in the last 7 years. It went from 80,000 to 40,000. They've had the credit rating downgraded 4 straight times under state control. Now imagine if a local group had done this. The governor would have come in and said, you guys can't manage your affairs. We need to appoint an emergency manager. This is the record of the emergency manager. Okay? So the notion that somehow state-appointed person can solve a problem that local officials aren't has been proven in Flint and is proven in Detroit untrue. But what's the right answer? I think there is an answer to a blend of saying you have your local elected officials in control, but there ought to be some state accountability on the finances, as I have today with the state-appointed Financial Review Commission. I have to go in every month, show my balance in my budget, paying my bills. I'm fine with that. But as long as I am, the mayor and council have the authority here. And so I think you have to return the authority to the local school board. I believe in this town, if you said we're having an election for the new school board in August, you would get the best and brightest people in our town to run for school board. I think you would get the people of this city to pay attention to that race. I think we get a quality school board. If you leave the State Financial Review Commission in place as I proposed, the state can still be there to watch the finances, But there's no way parents who are making a decision of whether to put my kid into this high school for the next 4 years are going to send kids to high schools where you don't know who's turning over as emergency manager from year to year. We've already seen for 7 years, it doesn't work. And so I think if we could get a bill through the legislature in March, we could have school board elections in August.
And you're confident that that would look different than what we are used to seeing in this town?
I absolutely am. And again, when I decided to run for mayor, I had a lot of people who said, what's he thinking? He's got no chance. People won't vote for him.
You are white.
And right. And you know what? Suburbanites cared, Detroiters didn't. And the fact is, people in this city, if they're given good choices, will make good choices. And I think in this point, in this city, I think you're going to see some really qualified people in this town run for school board, and I think you'll see voters make good decisions.
Yeah, I know you're headed to Lansing after this to go testify in the hearings about this legislation. One of the things you still need, or you say you still need from the legislators, is this Detroit Education Commission, right. A new sort of, I guess, ultimate authority on things like school siting, opening and closing of charter schools, quality control. There's been real pushback against that from the charter community, which says, look, the whole idea here was innovation, and we should be able to do what we need to do, and so it's not in the bills. How do you change
not yet,
that?
But we're getting there. So the thing about Detroit schools is, if you deal with the Detroit public schools, you haven't solved the education problem. We've got 200 schools in Detroit, 100 public schools and 100 charter schools. We've got a lot of charter schools that are performing no better than the public schools. In fact, we got 7 charter schools that have reading and math levels at half the rate of the public schools. I am 100% pro-school choice. I think every parent should have a right to put their kids in public schools or charter schools. The voters of Detroit are 100% pro-school choice. They voted overwhelmingly to place their kids in charter schools. But what we have now is chaos. 12 different authorizers can open or close schools. And here's the thing I'd like everybody to think about, and I talked about this last night. Since the state takeover, 80% of all schools in the last 7 years, 80% of all schools in Detroit have opened or closed. Now think about your own school districts where your kids are. If 80% of the schools in your district open and closed in the last 7 years, wouldn't you be raising hell over the education? And we feel the same way. And so what I'm saying is this: I want a mayor-appointed Detroit Education Commission that doesn't run a school, that we're the judge on how you're doing. The school board runs the Detroit schools, the charter boards run the charter schools, but what we say is this: we need to make sure schools are located evenly across the city. We had an 18-month period where 12 schools opened and closed in one neighborhood in southwest Detroit. No good school, stable school, can survive under that. We got a 15-square-mile area of Brightmoor without a single high school. Now, in your districts, if you happen to live in a suburb, would you tolerate all the schools concentrated in one end of town and no schools in this end of town? And so there needs to be a judge, an education commission that says, this is where the schools are located. You want to open a new one, you come and you show us why you need it. We've got an area where we need one, we'll come and invite you in to apply. Single standard of performance for everybody, judge you all the same. And we grow the quality schools, and we, on the non-performing schools, give them time to improve, or if not, close them down and bring a quality school in. We stay as the judge that doesn't choose sides between the public and the charter. That's what I want to establish. And so far, these strongest charter schools have been fighting me, and I keep saying to them, all you're doing is defending the poor performers. And we're seeing movement now. I think the strong charter operators, and we got some great charter schools in Detroit, I think the strong charter operators started to see that what they're doing is damaging, and I'm hoping we're going to get to a resolution shortly. Okay, so your prediction, you'll get the legislation in time to get this election going I don't August? Predict Lansing, but there is on the Senate side really good leadership on both the Republican and Democratic sides. And if we get movement first, it'll be on the Senate. And then, and term limits has just killed this state. If there's one thing we got to take on, we got to deal with the term limit problem. But on the Senate side, you tend to have people who have been around longer. Many were in the House before, and you've got some experience. On the House side, you've got a whole bunch of people who were doing something else in life, have been there a year or 2 years, who are making decisions on the education policy of the future, and they haven't had the time to develop the expertise. And so it's going to take longer. It just does. It's the nature of things. But I'm hopeful that people of goodwill will prevail.
Okay. Mayor Mike Duggan, City of Detroit, thank you for being here.